pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, so tonight we're gonna kick it off with our ethics refresher training with Town Council Lisa Mead. This is something we should really get back into the habit of doing on a regular basis. I know I've taken place in a couple of them since I've been here, but it's something we should definitely bring back in.
Thank you. So this is a kind of an overview of a number of things that control the Board of Selectmen, and I found that picture on the internet. That was kind of beautiful. Yeah, nice blue sky. Right? So as a reminder, the overarching controlling policies and laws and regulations that control the Board of Selectmen are Chapter 460 of the Acts of 2008, which established the Selectmen Administrator form of government. Chapter 447 of the Acts of 2008, which increased the membership on the Board of Selectmen from 3 to 5. The Board of Selectmen Code of Ethics, which you recently adopted. The Open Meeting Law, Chapter 30A. Public Records Law, Chapter 66, and the Conflict of Interest Law. So those are the big overarching things. Obviously there are a lot of other little things here and there, but by and large, those are the things that control your day-to-day activities as members of the Board of Selectmen. So in 2008, this is not a surprise to anybody, the town voted to move from a 3-person Board of Selectmen to a 5. As a reminder, the board acts as a board. I do this training to a lot of my towns because a lot of folks think they become elected officials and they then act as an elected official. But when you're elected to a board, you can only act as a board. So if the board takes a vote, that's what you get to do. Obviously, you get to answer constituent inquiries and things of that nature, but by and large, for any official action, you need to do that as a board. And so members cannot make decisions on their own without a vote of the board. Obviously, you can represent constituents, and if you want to realize full authority, then you need to bring something to the board for an act by the board. At times, boards sits as other legal entities. So tonight, I think you're going to sit as a local licensing authority, not the Board of Selectmen. You sit as a special permit granting authority for a couple of permits, and one of those right now is the golf course center thing. And I give you those examples because you have different responsibilities and different authority in those situations. So once you open a public hearing as a special permit granting authority, no member can act on their own or engage in outside conversations about any evidence or with any people involved in that public hearing. It has to all happen at the public hearing. You can't go out and act on your own during that public hearing process. I bring that up because it's not usual necessarily for boards of selectmen to sit as a special permit granting authority. A few of my towns have bylaws that require that. But by and large, that's either the planning board or the zoning board, and they're used to that position. But in this instance, the Board of Selectmen actually sit as special permit granting authority. You do that for solar facilities too. Yeah. Right. Anybody have any questions about any of those things?
Quick question: is this all going to be PowerPoint? You think we can print out?
Yeah, we can print it out. I'm going to leave the thumb drive with Martha, okay, so we can print that out for everybody for sure. So then also in 2008, you adopted the Town Administrator Act. And before that, basically when you had a 3-person Board of Selectmen, you had an executive secretary, that person kind of acted and ran things in the town at the behest of the Board of Selectmen. However, when the town adopted the Town Administrator Act, the town decided that it was going to move into professional management. And so the Town Administrator Act says that the Board of Selectmen is going to hire a professional to manage the town. Certainly the administration of the fiscal, prudential, and municipal affairs of the town, the policies of the town remain with the Board of Selectmen, including certain appointments under the special act. So the police chief and the officers are handled by the Board of Selectmen. Town council is appointed by the Board of Selectmen. And there's a few other people that are appointed by the Board of Selectmen. And then, of course, you adopt policies in the general direction of the town. However, you're required to hire a town administrator under the special act to supervise and manage the day-to-day operations of the town. So that took the day-to-day operations away from the Board of Selectmen and put it in the town manager. So the power to hire and fire personnel, to discipline personnel, to negotiate contracts, to create and administer the budget of the town, to prosecute and defend or compromise litigation. But of course, the town administrator reports to the Board of Selectmen to update them on those various matters, because of course it affects the ongoing policies and budget and things like that. But the day-to-day operations pursuant to the Town Administrator Act is up to the town administrator.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So, Newbury adopted the Town Administrator Act. There's also a town manager form of government. Is that different than we have?
There is. So there are, towns can do just about anything they want depending on what they adopt, if anything. So the town adopted a special act, a home rule petition, saying for the town of Newbury, this is what we're gonna have. There are some towns that literally adopt the Town Manager Act, which is a statute. There's also a Town Administrator's General Law, Town Administrators Act. And there are towns that have a home rule charter, that the charter specifically says what either the town administrator or town manager's responsibilities are. Some charters even go into the responsibility of the town meeting members, if it's a representative town meeting, for example. So as a town, you can adopt any management style you want. In this instance, the town, through town meeting and then through the legislature, adopted this particular Town Administrators Act. And so you might recall at the last town meeting, we amended this slightly, relating to the appointment of, there was a discussion about the appointment of the town clerk, but then there was some other clarifications regarding
Board of Health.
the Board of Health and some other things like, there was a few minor tweaks that we did to it at the last town meeting.
Yeah.
So town meeting is the one who actually decides.
The town meeting and then the legislature, literally the legislature. The town meeting says, we want this to be our form of government in the town of Newbury. Town meeting sends it to the legislature, Great and General Court, and they approve it for the town of Newbury. And so the Town Administrators Act actually supersedes, because it's a home rule amendment, actually supersedes any of the general laws that might conflict with it.
Okay.
It's your own law.
Now, my understanding is that when things need to be done, we're supposed to tell Tracy what we'd like done, and then she tells either the highway department or the fire department or any other department essentially how to proceed.
Right.
Now, if there's something like a tree down, now that we have a bucket truck, we should still be going through Tracy to tell James
Yeah.
that there's a tree down.
Because otherwise you've got 5, 6 people telling the department heads what to do. The day-to-day operations are the town manager. So as the chief elected officials, as I said earlier about the constituents, if there's a constituent that has a problem, oh, there's a tree it's a town tree fell across my driveway, pick up the phone and call the town administrator. The town administrator doesn't do her job and get James out there to take care of it. Well, your beef is with the town administrator. But the idea behind the Town Administrators Act was to have centralized management so that there would be somebody responsible for all of that. So if any of you have issues with the day-to-day operations, you go to the town administrator, and then the town administrator manages. And if you're not happy with the town administrator's management, you as a board have that conversation.
And correct me if I'm wrong, I kind of liken it to when I was younger at work, being kind of a junior with dad and uncles as bosses. Sometimes you have 3 bosses, and you have to decide who you're gonna make unhappy in a pinch, and that's a terrible position to be in, especially, you know, a farm and, you know, professional situation like this are 2 totally different things.
Yeah, but
Keeps
even
people from being put in a funny
so
spot.
let's say you actually have a constituent, 2 constituents who have conflicting views. So one constituent calls you, one constituent calls you. Both of you call a department head, not the town administrator. Both of you call a department head, and the department head's like, what do I do, right? Call the town administrator, let the town administrator make the decision and deal with it, because the town administrator is gonna know that somebody called you and somebody called you, right? And not the department head.
Quick question, if the town administrator is out for conference, so it can't be reached specification. Who's next in command?
I would go to
The
the
chair.
chair of the board of selectmen.
Okay,
Chair of the board of selectmen.
okay, good.
And to go back for just a second to the special permit thing,
Yeah.
with the golf center, have we done something unethical by making point people on both the planning board and the selectmen, because we have to talk to Eric?
No, you've done that, you did that as a special permit authority. You
Yes.
voted that at a meeting. It's fine. That
Okay.
was a method by which to implement that permit, given all the problems that occurred.
Problems.
It's just like,
Okay, well, good, I'm glad that wasn't unethical.
okay? Then I just found this photo too. Anybody know where that is?
Parker Street.
Where do you think that is, Parker Street?
Parker Street, that's right, the house is still there, the oaks, I think the tree's still there,
Is it? I thought it was on the common, the upper green.
pretty sure it's Parker.
I don't know, I just saw it, I found it online in Newbury.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right. So then you recently adopted the code of conduct. I don't need to spend a lot of time on that, but I think that more and more, particularly starting about 3 years ago, I've started to have more and more boards of selectmen on their own adopt codes of conduct or codes of behavior for town employees and then the elected officials and things like that. So you guys are part of that trend. You know, the things that it includes, I'll just point out, but you don't need to dwell on them because you just did it. You all adopt in there that the actions you take are going to be in the public interest. You're going to comply with the laws. You deal with conduct of members, which I think is important, about respecting the process of the board and town government. And that goes back to what I just said, the Town Administrators Act, the independence of your various boards, planning board, conservation commission, you know, Board of Health, respecting everybody's boards. I call it staying in your lanes, right? Making sure that every board and commission, including yourself, stays in everybody's lane that they're supposed to be driving in. Communication in and out of meetings, and of course this goes to a couple of things. It goes to the open meeting law, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. It goes to making sure that your communication goes to the town administrator as opposed to amongst yourselves so you don't violate the open meeting law. And making sure, of course, that you get information ahead of time so you have the right information to vote or take any action as a board. Confidential information, this is really important. The Board of Selectmen are privy to, particularly through your executive sessions and updates on personnel matters, you're privy to confidential information. The chair is privy to more than other members, but certainly as part of the executive session, you get confidential information that could harm the town or town's negotiating position if you do something with it outside of the executive session. So that's a really, really important part of your policy. Use of public resources, you dealt with that. So, you know, none of you are going to go take a DPW truck and drive down the beach, for example, right? So that's a big kind of obvious example. But other public resources are employees, you know, public resources are employees, they're buildings. So use of public resources has to all go through the board. The board needs to decide how they're going to do that together. You have a budget that governs your public resources. You don't want to act outside of that budget or in a manner in which causes the budget to have a shortfall. And then, as I said earlier, respecting the independence of other boards and commissions. And you know, nicely, that's not been an issue in the board. In my experience with the board, anyway, in Newbury, I have some towns that there's a lot of pressure on other boards and commissions by the Board of Selectmen or individual board members of the Board of Selectmen. It doesn't appear as a problem here, and that's nice, and it's nice that you adopted it as part of your policy. Anybody have any other questions about that? All right, then we're going to get into the fun stuff here. The open meeting law. Okay, so here are the basic requirements. Let's talk about setting up a meeting. You have to have 48 hours notice for the meeting. It has to be written. And it used to be, before 2000 and the law changed in 2012-ish, you might remember a long time ago where, I remember this, at the beginning of every year, everybody at the town clerk's office posted every meeting for the year, right? So that way they didn't forget about posting meetings, right? So every, 52 meetings or 104 meetings were posted. And the agenda, that was it. We posted our meetings, we're all good. But the law changed and said that's not sufficient anymore. Posting a meeting includes an agenda. So you actually have to put on the agenda what the chair reasonably anticipates is going to be on the agenda. And the law says it is the responsibility of the chair, of any chair, to post the agenda and put what that chair reasonably believes is going to be on the agenda. And so that's actually the notice in the agenda for a meeting. That's the proper posting requirements. You can have emergencies in less than 48 hours. What's an emergency? An emergency is not, oh, darn, I forgot to post the meeting. An emergency is, it's just snowed 15 feet and the building's gonna collapse. And we have to authorize the expenditure of funds. That is an emergency. Those kinds of things are emergencies, real emergencies. You have to take minutes. You have to take minutes as well. You have to take minutes, and they have to be readily available within several meetings of the meeting that occurred. They have to be available to the public, even in draft form, right after the meeting. What is deliberation? Because the only time that you can deliberate as a board is in a posted public meeting. And deliberation is, even with if you appoint a committee, let's say that JR appoints a committee of 2, that group is now a committee, and they can't talk to one another. You guys are right here, so I'm talking. So if you're on a committee together, you can't pick up the phone and talk to each other except for to schedule a meeting about the content of the meeting.
So everything has to be done at the subcommittee.
Everything has to be done at either your subcommittee meeting or at the selectmen's meeting. This also includes, so telephone calls can be considered deliberation, and emails. So the only thing you're allowed to do on email that you go back and forth on is the setting up of meetings or the distribution of materials. You may not pass on how you believe a certain, you can't pass on your position on a certain topic. So if you get an agenda and the agenda says, we're gonna take all the sand off the beach. That's what the agenda says, that's an item. And somebody replies to that whole agenda and says, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, I'm never gonna vote for that.
Can't do that.
Can't do that, that's a deliberation. So you can't offer your opinion in response to the emails that go out. You can receive information on scheduling and what's going to be on the agenda, but you can't offer your opinion. And you can reply singly to the chair, I can be here at this time, I can't be here at this time, whatever. But you can't reply all and carry on a conversation.
So
And that is even anything that would fall under your purview. Essentially the chief elected officials, that's pretty much everything.
So I have a question about the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
So we set, or he sets the agenda,
Yes,
and there's items listed on it.
yes.
Now, one agenda item in the agenda is public comment.
Yep.
Or citizen concern, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Citizen's concern.
Mm-hmm.
So if a citizen comes up and has a question about something that's going on in town, I'm just saying it like that we have a upcoming possible, what's it, low-income housing, what do you call it?
40B.
Yeah, a 40B, right? And let's say that's not posted on our agenda.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have somebody comes in and is really upset over that, and they want to have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
Personally, I don't know if this is true, it's my question to you, I don't think we should talk about it.
Yeah, so what happens, and this is hard because most boards, selectmen and city councils and whatever group you are, want to hear what citizens have to say, right? I mean, that's your job. And so it's okay to have citizens' concerns, citizens' participation. But if somebody brings up a matter of substance of that nature, then you can listen to them. And then if it requires further consideration, you can say, or ask the chair, can you put that on an agenda in the upcoming meeting that we can actually have a conversation about it, okay? You can respond, well, when is that gonna happen? You can say, oh, well that, hasn't been filed yet, and we're waiting on a letter to go back to MHP and we'll let you know. You can respond in that manner, but if you're gonna have a substantive discussion, you need to schedule it for another meeting.
Because it wasn't on the agenda.
Does that mean that someone's asking for an opinion or a motion from us?
No, if you're gonna have a substantive discussion,
That's pretty subjective.
It is, but you're not, so certainly if they're gonna make a decision on something.
Yeah.
But you can, each of you can make a comment about it, you really can't get into the weeds though. You know, you can say, we're concerned about it too, maybe we should put it on an agenda. We understand your concerns, we'll take those into consideration. If we have it on our agenda in the future, we'll let you know about it. But you really should not have a substantive discussion on it. This is, for the first 4 or 5 years of the new open meeting law, this was a big issue, citizens' participation, citizens' concerns, and how folks in your position responded to that, because you want to respond to it, right? You want to have the conversation because they're here talking to you, but you really have to be careful about it. You really have to be just
Because it's
right
not
on the edge.
posted. It is-
It's not posted.
And it's hard to say where is the threshold.
Right.
Someone comes to a meeting in citizens' concerns and says there's a bush in the way at this intersection.
So, and thank you very much, we'll make sure the DPW director knows about it. That's fine, you can do that, that's fine. Now, if you start to talk about, you know, well, the bush is in the middle of the intersection and, you know, we should vote to have that intersection remodeled, and, you know, you can't do that.
It's different, right?
Right.
But what about things like, you know, the trash on the beach, when people would bring that up and, you know, or where the porta potties are located? If that came up in the citizens' concerns, we couldn't then make a decision to move the porta potties?
No, not that night, absolutely not.
Okay.
So, absolutely what you cannot do is make a motion and take a vote. No, you can definitely not do that.
And
You
that's
can
the
be-
reason, because the rest of the town hasn't.
Hasn't had a chance.
That's exactly right, that's exactly right. So, you can, it's a fine line on everything else, right? You can be sympathetic, you can have a bit of a discussion, we hear you, we'll refer that to whatever, we'll put it on the next agenda, but you should always know, you cannot make a motion and you may not take a vote.
Can we ask the town administrator to look into it further?
Yeah, absolutely,
Okay.
absolutely. And report back to have, as part of the town manager's or town administrator's report.
Just, this is what happened to me today. I got a note from the Director of Veterans over in Ipswich. There's an event coming up on the 17th, we're not meeting till the 25th.
All you're gonna do is announce the event?
Just,
You can announce the event.
Even though it's not on the.
You guys aren't gonna you're not gonna vote on it, you're not gonna do anything, you're just gonna announce the
Okay,
event.
so that's, okay,
Just
okay.
announce the event.
So
Now,
I look at it like, if this is a concern, and it's brought up, and if something that this board takes action on, or makes a decision on, and it might make somebody else not too happy about it, then it's giving me a knot in my stomach, I shouldn't be talking about it.
so you should put it
Right?
on an agenda.
Right.
Right, put it on the agenda. Now, I will also say to you that the 48 hours, what the chair, when you post the agenda, it needs to be 48 hours, what the chair reasonably believes at that time should be on the agenda. There are things that come up between the time of the posting of the agenda and the meeting that the chair might not have known about, that need to happen. Maybe there's a storm, maybe there's a contract that came in that he didn't know about, the town administrator didn't know about, it's a grant, has to be signed. You can add those things to the agenda that's already been posted, right? You're not having a meeting in less than 48 hours. The agenda's been posted, the meeting's been posted, something comes up to add to the agenda. You can do that. You can do that. Before the meeting.
As long as it's not something big like a 40B. We can't.
Yeah, because that's not something that would be, that would not be reasonable to know.
Right.
That's not something that would not be reasonable to know. Those don't just surprise you.
Right.
Right.
Jay had a
Kind of
good
a
point a
surprise.
couple weeks ago. We all gonna be lawyers pretty soon.
Yeah, it's a lot of rules these days.
It is a lot of rules. Okay, and then executive session. You all know, the reasons for executive session: litigation, purchase of real estate, labor negotiations, employee personnel matters. Those are the reasons for executive session. Really, other than that, unless allowed by statute. So let me give you an example of what's allowed by statute. It's not applicable to the board. But the Board of Assessors has a very specific statute that allows them to go into executive session most of the time on most requests for abatements. Because it's private personnel, private financial information involved. But that's something that's specific to a statute under the Board of Assessors. and is not enumerated under chapter 30A as reasons for an executive session, except for the kind of the catch-all, unless otherwise required or allowed by statute, okay? All right. Public records law goes hand in hand with the open meeting law. So, every written record which you keep or make or transmit as a member of the Board of Selectmen is a public record. What about your private notes? Okay, so you have, let's say you have stuff here that you are referring to in a deliberation.
Black book.
Hang on a second on your little black book. Those are actually public records. So let me give you, there was a case out of Wayland, and they were going to appoint a superintendent, town manager. No, superintendent, because it was a school thing. And so they had done their private executive session, the recommendations would come forward, and then they were deciding on who to take. So they were negotiating the contract in executive session, and then they were gonna come out. When they came out, there were things that were part of that negotiation that would have been typically private. But one of the members started reading from their notes in the executive session. That document became public. So if you read from something that would otherwise become public, or you were trying to keep as private, if you refer to it or read it in a public session, they're part of the record. They're part of the minutes of the meeting, okay? They're public. All of your emails about town business, even if it's on your private email, are public documents. I had a town I worked for that there was a big blowout amongst the selectmen. And this was right after the change of the open meeting law and public records law a few years ago, and they were going at each other on their emails. And the newspaper made a public records request. And I spent thousands of dollars and tens of hours going through reams of emails before I could turn them over to make sure that what I was looking for was actually a public document and something not private. So be careful, because whatever you do, even if it's on your personal computer, if it has to do with Board of Selectmen or town business over which you have authority, it's a public document. It doesn't have to be on a town email.
So, quick question, so if a resident comes to me and asks it as an issue, and I don't think it's a big issue, okay, and is to try to talk them down, I can't even do that on
You can do that.
But it's a public record.
It's a public record.
okay.
You can absolutely do that.
All right.
But it's a public, if somebody called and said, somebody made a public records request and said, I want all of your emails regarding any correspondence you've had as a member of the Board of Selectmen, that's a public record.
Okay.
So why is it that when we are elected to our positions, we do not have our own town of Newbury email address?
That's a private, I have towns that are mixed. I have towns that have nothing but town email addresses, and I have towns that are private people who use their private email addresses.
We have both.
Yeah.
Both.
I think,
Yeah, I set up one for myself when I got elected, but there is a town one for me.
Is that on your card?
I have to look at my card. I've been
Because
getting
I think we all have the same email. It's like if you had a card printed with it extra, it's like, I'd be interested to find out if you did.
Well, I think everything goes through the town of Newbury, Board of Selectmen at townofnewbury.com, and then Ellen triages them. That's her job as an executive assistant.
You can do that, but know that if you have stuff on your private email that is Board of Selectmen business, it's town business. It's
Yeah.
public record.
Hillary Clinton.
So, just to clarify this last thing we're talking about, I often write on my agendas
Yeah.
when I need to clarify things for myself.
Yeah, those are not
Okay.
considered public records. Your private notes that are clearly like, keeping track of things on your own, making sure you remember certain
Yeah, that's
things. Those are not public documents.
Okay.
Those are private
I,
notes.
from what you
It's
said
a
about
huge-
taking the notes out of the meeting.
Well, it's
Well, no,
a huge-
but this had to do with like a referral sheet, like a grading sheet that he was taking notes on, like a ranking sheet.
Yes.
Right. That was
Okay.
supposed to be kept private, but because of the way he referred to it and read it in a public meeting and had his notes on it, it became a public document.
Got it.
Okay? Now, all of you, I think, most of you got books. There are books that Ellen prepares for everybody. And when you get sworn in, you get these documents and these laws. You all have these laws. So the open meeting law has a provision in it that in the conflict of interest law that presumes you to know it. Okay, so you're automatically presumed to know it, and therefore if you violate it, it's on purpose, because you're presumed to have known it. Just FYI. Okay, so I'm going to do a brief overview of the conflict of interest law, because we could do this for 4 hours. So, general rule, do not use your official position to gain an advantage that a private citizen would otherwise be entitled to. Period. Right? That's it. So, let's say that you found out that the town was going to sell a piece of property, and you knew about that, and then you told a friend who was a developer, oh, by the way, pay attention to this, the town's going to sell it, and we'll make sure we do a deal on it, right? You obviously can't do that. This is, as much as I hate to say that, this is all common sense, but sometimes not so much. This is important. So the law says that if you ask the Ethics Commission for an opinion, a written opinion, okay, or me, and I give you a final written opinion, or the Ethics Commission gives you a final written opinion, and later somebody tries to prosecute you on that matter, on that specific matter, you can rely on either my opinion or the Ethics Commission opinion. Now, what's key here is, if you call the Ethics Commission and ask them for their written opinion, or email them and ask them for their written opinion, you can't have taken the action yet you're asking about.
You can't go back in time.
Because they are an enforcement authority, right? So you can't say, so the other day, I was appointed to be the, you know, the the salt marsh hay warden, and I'm the Board of Selectmen and I appointed myself to do that. And so I've already started to be paid to do that. You can't do that because it's already happened, right? You can say, hey, I'm a member of the Board of Selectmen and they want to appoint me to be the warden of the salt marsh hay, blah, blah, blah. Can I do that? And they'll give you a written opinion and you can rely on it. Similarly, if you ask me for my opinion under the conflict of interest law, I can give you my opinion. Now, when I give you my opinion, I also at the same time have to send it to the Ethics Commission and it has to go on record with the town clerk. The Ethics Commission may agree with me or may not agree with me. And I can tell you, sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. What they do is, oh, by the way, you should tell them to do this or that also, right? So then we update it. So once that process happens, then you can rely on that opinion as well. Also, you can't rely on verbal. It has to be in writing. It has to be in writing.
Why do they give a verbal opinion then?
Because it takes, they represent 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts and all the hundreds of people in all of those towns and everybody in the state agencies.
All right. Quick question. The one that's right with me, I still haven't received it written yet.
Oh yeah, you did.
I didn't get it personally. They even sent a note, what's Mr. Doyle's email, private address, stuff.
But they asked us to send it to you, and I gave it to you.
You mailed it to me?
I emailed it to you. I forwarded the
Oh, okay.
email to you.
I thought I needed the hard copy.
No, just
Okay,
print out the
okay,
attachment.
okay.
Yeah, just print out the attachment. Yeah, I forwarded it to you that
Okay,
day.
thank you. Okay.
So that's all squared away.
Yeah, it's all done. They actually had
Fine.
no comments. They agreed with my whole thing. Do not take gifts over $50. What if it's a gift to the board? Is that a violation? So I use that as an example. What if somebody comes in, a developer comes in and goes to the planning office and puts a big basket down on the desk in the planning office? It's worth, you know, $100. Is that a violation? No, not if everybody in the department down there eats off of it, right? So you can't, you know, Martha couldn't take it home by herself. As long as everybody down there got to take part in it, you're okay. Similarly, if somebody puts something out front here at the front office with Ellen and says this is for the Board of Selectmen and everybody in town hall gets to partake in it, you're okay. If somebody gives JR a basket and says don't give it to anybody, he needs to give it back. Okay. Also, if somebody offers you tickets to like a ball game or something like that, it's not the face value of the ticket, it's the fair market value of the ticket, right? So we all know the face value of a Red Sox ticket, what is $75 now at the Green Monster, but the real fair market value is $150, well, maybe not this year. So, you know, it's gotta be the fair market value. Training sessions versus trips, so you could be sent somewhere for a training session. Some employees could be sent to, I don't know, Connecticut or Hartford or Florida for a training session, and the town can pay for that, or the group offering the training session can pay for that. That's okay. However, if you're buying a fire engine from this company that makes them in Minnesota, and I cannot remember the name of them, K1, no. There's a company, there's one of the big fire truck companies. They're better about it now. What they used to do is they'd say, we're gonna build your fire truck for you, and then they'd say to the fire chief and the deputy fire chief, we're gonna pay you to come out so you can see it. And we're gonna put you up, and we're gonna give you dinners, and then we're gonna send you back. Can't do that. The town can pay them to go out to see it, but the company can't pay them to go out to see the fire truck. And then finally, you may not represent a third party before the town while a member of the Board of Selectmen. What does that mean? So you can't advocate on behalf of a housing group in front of the zoning board while you're a member of the Board of Selectmen, using your position as a Board of Selectmen.
What about like a?
That's different than a constituent.
What about like, there's a trash company, I don't even know what, say there's a trash company or a salon in town that wants to add on, is that, how would that fall under?
So you want to go to like the zoning board and say, this is a really good business in town, we want to keep it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can do that, because you have no financial interest in it.
But that's as a member of the board.
That's as a member of the board, right? Not.
What if it was something that fell
Correct.
under the authority of the board? I guess I'm struggling.
Well, you would need to, you can't represent anybody in front of the board that's appearing before the board,
Okay,
ever.
right.
Right. Now, if you have private property and you have a constituent, let's say you're the special permit granting authority, let's say it's a solar facility or the golf course, right? And you're an abutter, you can, so long as you don't appear on the board, you can go out and defend your property interests in the audience, but you can't ever sit as a member of the board on that matter.
Now, what makes a third party an actual entity? Like, there are lots of citizen groups and the PTA and things like that.
Yeah, so first, you always have to see if you have a financial interest, right? And then the question is, are you using undue influence, right? So are you representing them as a private citizen or a member of the Board of Selectmen? So you never want to advocate as if you're an outsider in front of the town, because then you're representing somebody against the town, even though against is a hard word to define there.
Mm-hmm.
You could always work with constituents, generally speaking. But by and large, it's not a good idea as individuals to go to other boards and represent people before those boards on their behalf. You can go as a member of the Board of Selectmen. The Board of Selectmen has taken a vote and we think this is a really good idea. You can do that. That's different. But doing it individually is a fine line, and you should always ask about it first. Okay? And that's it. Wow.
All right.
Anybody have any other questions or anything about this at all?
To go back to the ethics decision, or decision from you, and this is kind of unrelated, but recently there's a change in labor law regarding Sundays, and I know some companies are being sued for following what the Department of Labor set as the standard previously, before the Supreme Court of Mass changed how they viewed Sundays.
Because of the new laws?
Yeah, and so I guess I'm curious, if the ethics board says it's okay one day and the Supreme Court of Massachusetts decided something was not okay at a later date, where would we fall legally?
Well, that's true. So first of all, the Ethics Commission wouldn't have anything to say about labor on Sundays.
Okay, I'm
Right, so,
just using that as an
so
example
if you have,
where
no, if you
two
have,
authorities
yeah.
got used.
so if you have a written opinion from either myself or from the Ethics Commission that says you can do X, and the law later changes, well, you followed so one of the questions is, do you intentionally do something wrong, right? So at the time you were doing it, you did everything you were supposed to do to make sure it was correct.
Mm-hmm.
So if the law later changes, they can't go back on you. You're allowed to use, the statute actually says you can use those written opinions as your defense. You can rely on them.
Okay.
So as far as the open meeting, I'm sorry, you know.
No, I mean, it seems strange to me that following the guidelines of the Department of Labor can get a company sued now when the Supreme Court has made a different decision about.
Well, but they would say, right, so so every decision is different, and most of them would say that from this day forward, this is what our interpretation is, right? So those other people that were doing it along the way and everybody thought that they were following the right law, they're not going to be held liable. But as of this point forward, this is what our interpretation is.
Mm-hmm.
So start doing it now.
So as far as the the open meeting law goes, right, that applies to not only the Board of Selectmen, but all,
Any public body.
right,
So, if the Board of Selectmen creates a committee, the Evergreen Committee, okay? That's a public body. They have to follow the open meeting law. If the town administrator creates a committee on her own to advise her, okay? That is not a public body unless the town administrator created the committee at your request. So the example I'm going to give you is there was a superintendent who created a building committee at the behest of the school committee. The school committee says, we want to examine all of our buildings. Superintendent created school building needs committee. Okay? So the superintendent created one, having them report to him, and didn't post those meetings. The Division of Open Government said, no, contraire, that's a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen. On the other hand, a town manager creates a long-term strategic plan committee made up of a member of the Board of Selectmen, a member of the Planning Board, a member of the Zoning Board, staff, and they reported to him and made up a strategic plan. Then, on his annual goals and objectives, it was to create a strategic plan. And he provided that to the Board of Selectmen. That was not a public body because he did it on his own, not at the behest of the Board of Selectmen. He created his goal. They said okay to the goal, but they didn't say to him, Mr. Town Manager, go create a strategic planning committee and report back to us. See the difference? One is an administrative function and one is at the request of the public body. So you have to be careful about those, but those are the things. So basically, you create any subcommittees or any other independent committees, they are public bodies.
Should we be asking anybody that's on committees to be taking the ethics class online?
When they get sworn in, depending on the committees, when they get sworn in, the town manager, the town clerk does that.
So I just wanted to, and I know that the legislature is not privy to the open meeting law.
They're not subject to the open meeting
They're
law.
not subject to it.
Right, they're privy to it, but not subject
Yeah,
to it.
that's true, sorry, wrong word. And it was passed in the middle of the night. And-
Well, I don't know that it was passed in the middle of the night, there was a lot of argument about it. It was very clear, it was one of the big objections a lot of people had, but it was very clear that they weren't going to be subject to it.
So I just,
Same
I know
with the public
it-
records law.
the same thing with the public records law. So I know it's been frustrating for a couple of our boards and committees that they feel as if they can't get anything done because everything has to be done in an open in a public meeting, but I just want to say that that's the nature of this form of government.
It's the nature of the beast.
It has to be done in an open forum, and it has to be done You can't even talk about it outside, you can't, it's.
In the seventies, they called it the sunshine law.
Right.
Remember that?
Sunshine laws, right. And everything has to be discussed, and even if you can't come to a decision now, you can't talk about it until you come back
Right.
together. You can continue to talk about it, and it's time consuming, but it's the nature of the beast.
That is correct. Okay. That's it.
Thank you.
All right,
Thank
you're
you.
welcome,
Lisa.
you're welcome. And you're in charge of turning the thing off, and Martha will come get it.
And I'm
Get it
gonna
later.
go from TV now.
Thanks, Lisa.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Lisa.
Okay.
Don't go too
Okay.
fast, 'cause I'm gonna break this.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, we have to,
It's secretary here.
I'll just run all through these. Okay. We have a commercial plan permit application, David Elwell, 48 Fruit Street, Byfield.
Motion to approve license.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Don't be going too fast. Damon motioned, Jeff
Second.
second. All approved. Okay, next.
Yeah, review, approve, and sign 2019 new business license as follows. Felice Bonfa, DBA Walk My Paws, 90 Newbury Turnpike, dog training and play care.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And we have a one-day liquor license, Jill O'Leary, Olson and About a Time to Cure ALS fundraiser, Governor's Academy, Sunday, August 25th, 2019, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 We don't have citizens.
No, but I mean, if we get people good enough to turn out, anything you folks? Nothing tonight?
Did they open the flats in Newbury yet?
That's a good question.
I will say, I believe so.
The website's saying that they're closed till further notice, but all the other towns around are open.
I can almost, they were gonna open them last Sunday, not last Sunday, Sunday before last. And I would say 90% sure, because I got a call from Peter, that, and I'm positive, but you know what, don't go claiming without checking.
Huh?
I think the red tide moved on.
Meeting updates.
Okay, any meeting updates?
I just want, one thing, the veterans sent me an email today. They're having a barbecue at the Windrush Farm, and it's for veterans, active duty service members and their families. Basically, we'll learn about veteran volunteer programs. And it's Sunday, 17th of August, from 11 to 2. And everything I've done with these people so far has been top notch. The other Yankee Homecoming week, they had a veterans luncheon. And I'm telling you, Donnie knocks it out of the park when he does it. He gets a lot of help, and he just like, I mean, he does a nice job. And I think, and I letter from the board congratulate him what he's done so far. I mean, we see something.
Is there a motion?
Motion.
Okay.
Second?
All those in favor to write a letter of thanks for Don
Yeah.
Jarvis's
Yeah.
veteran work?
He's done amazing. Thank you.
Michael, did you say where Windrush Farm
Like I
is?
said, I just got the email, so,
Say, if
I
it
may
gives
have
the
to-
address and where it is.
yeah, hold on, it's got a website. It doesn't say, it's genwright@windrushfarms.org. I'm
That's
not
good
sure
enough.
what it is.
That's
Who
good.
moved that? Jeff, did you move
I
that?
think Jeff moved it. I suddenly had the fear that we were doing something that was outside the lines of what we're supposed to
Hey,
do.
No.
you can't forget this one. You see that?
Who seconded?
You see the
Mike.
pen at you?
But that, like I said, I don't know how he did it, but he got the highest ranking officer in the country to address the group. And like he said, I said, where'd you get that one? He says, I met him at Walter Reed when I was there, so.
Yeah, he knows a lot of
He knows a
people.
lot of people.
Yeah.
And I said, he uses the good stuff,
Yeah,
really does. So, that being said, that's all, the only meeting I went to.
okay. Any other meeting updates?
Yeah, there was, as Alicia alluded to, there was a site walk for the 40B last week. The plan is very similar to the last one, but there's time for community input, so please, if you're concerned, contact Martha with your concerns so that all citizens' concerns can go into a letter that goes back to the state. We've also had another meeting about the driving range and public hearing. And just for general information, the enforcement officers and the head of the planning board and I will be meeting in a closed meeting on Wednesday to discuss the golf center's request to do the lower tee area. And we'll render a decision on Wednesday, just so everyone knows.
We have a meeting on Wednesday night, right? Planning board
Yes.
meeting? We're supposed to be at? Is that true or false?
40B? I don't.
No, for the golf facility.
Not this Wednesday.
No, this
No,
one.
last Wednesday.
That was last Wednesday.
Okay.
We don't have anything until.
We set it a month out.
Yeah, no, we don't, our next meeting is the next
Yeah.
meeting we have, yeah,
Which was 20.
For them, okay.
All right.
for anything.
Yeah,
So I just wanted you guys, especially if you get asked questions about it, that's what's going on. We'll render a decision and I'll let you guys know what the decision is on Wednesday.
thank you.
Okay, see, we have a few things to sign just pertaining to our votes tonight.
All right, motion to adjourn?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.